Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar, Protect Students Online. My name is Allie Heater. I am the Executive Briefing Center Manager here at Lenovo, and we are thrilled to bring you today's webinar and quite the list of panelists to discuss a very important topic that we know is pertinent in today's world. You should be able to see a poll that is open. So if all of you wouldn't mind, go ahead and answer our question. What student safety challenges are you facing? It is multiple answers, so feel free to select any that best apply to you and your district. I'm going to just go through some quick housekeeping before I pass things over to our first presenter for today. All attendees have been placed on mute upon entry. So should you have any questions for any of our panelists, if you have feedback, if you'd like someone to repeat or elaborate on something, please utilize the questions tab on the GoToWebinar dashboard. We'll be monitoring that throughout the session to ensure that whatever questions you have do get answered. As the session goes on today, you will see polls as well, so we encourage as much poll utilization as possible. Please stick around at the end. We will have a raffle prize as well as a ton of good resource information based off of today's topics and from our panelists. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and close out today's poll, our first of 3 polls, and pass things over to Rich Henderson. All right.
Hey guys.
Rich, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Allie. Hey everyone, welcome to our first session of Smarter Learning Strategies around distance learning. So each of the next 6 weeks, we're going to be covering different topics around distance learning. As a Director of Global Education Solutions at Lenovo, my role is to develop and launch interesting solutions that are important to education, both K-12 and higher education worldwide. I think we're getting a screen share of the agenda. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing.
Let's see if we can get up the right slide set. And meanwhile, I'll kind of give you a breakdown of kind of what we're going to expect over the next 6 weeks. So today's focus is going to be on online protection. And we have some great guests here that we'll introduce in just a moment. Then we're going to go into immersive learning next week. We're going to talk about classroom management the week after, how to engage students, how to unlock students' creativity, and then finally, how to secure your devices. Now, for being here today, everyone's eligible to win a $50 gift card. If you attend 3 of the sessions out of the 6, you're eligible for a $100 gift card. So we're glad to have you. We're going to have some great speakers talking about pedagogy, as well as very practical uses for the technology in distance learning. And I'd like to welcome our co-host, Delia DeCourcy. Delia, please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Rich. Hi, everybody. Great to have you here. Thanks for joining us today. As Rich said, I'm Delia DeCourcy. I am a Global Education Solutions Manager on the Lenovo Worldwide Education team. And I'm really excited that we have so many fantastic guests here today to talk about protecting students online. As all of you know, it's a topic of tremendous importance in K-12 schools and districts, and even more so now with the pandemic and that learning has temporarily moved online. So first, I want to welcome our software partners from BARC and DNS Filters. So we have Renee Abrams here from BARC. Thanks for being here, Renee. And we have Josh Lamb from DNS Filter. He's the Director of Marketing. I do want to give our technology specialists a moment to introduce themselves. So Glenn Porter, would tell us a little bit about the involvement you have with protecting folks when it comes to online safety?
Absolutely. So my name is Glenn Porter. I'm the president and CEO of Fifth Gear Technology Concepts based here in Nashville. We are an outsourced IT solutions provider for small, medium businesses. We tend to focus a lot of work in the healthcare and legal professions, of which, a lot of that stuff will transcend into the education space.
Great, thanks so much. Thanks, Glenn. So Glenn's going to be sharing his experience with DNS Filter with us, and how robust it is, and the issues that accompany content filtering, which Jim Johnson also knows a lot about. He is a director of testing and educational technology in Morgan Local Schools in Ohio. So Jim, tell us a little bit about your role.
One of the things that I'm in charge of with related to this panel is making sure our students are doing the right things on their devices. We've got a small Southeast Ohio district that has 1,700 students, so we've got a one-to-one initiative for all of our students. So one of the things we always look for is how to protect our kids at home and at school, 24/7 protection. So that's what I'll be talking about later today. Excellent.
Thanks for being here. That is a big job, especially that you're covering both educational technology and testing, as we were talking about earlier. So I'm going to throw things back to Rich now. We'll get started talking about content filtering.
So hey, one of the things that Jim mentioned that I think is really important is it's one thing to think about when we have devices in the school systems, right? And we have everything behind a school network before it goes out to the web. But now that we've deployed these devices out into the students' homes, it's the Wild West, right? And we have to think about how to protect students on their school devices while they're at home. And so that's really been important to us is how do we make sure that the student devices are secure, that they're safe, that they're protecting the students, and from a teaching standpoint, that you're keeping the students focused on the lesson objectives and the learning outcomes that you want to achieve. So, you know, it's not just about the content, it's the applications and just the explosion of educational technology that's available to us as we are entering into this remote learning. So for Lenovo, that's been really essential to have great partnerships. You know, we're extremely proud of the innovation that we have in our devices, but without the software on those devices, you really can't be as effective. So Delia, why don't you take us through kind of this layered approach that we're taking to fight these challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. So really want to just provide a framework for this conversation when it comes to the needs that we see around student security and online safety, and then the corresponding solutions that address those needs. And as Rich said, it really takes a multi-layered or holistic approach in order to cover all of these bases. So let's start by talking about security. When we put devices in the hands of our students, it raises a multitude of issues right away, from malware to phishing to viruses and all kinds of other digital threats. And those threats have been increasing over the last 4 to 5 years, particularly when it comes to attacks on school districts, unfortunately. So if you look at the blue stripe, that top blue stripe in the graphic, we see is we've really got to have strong threat protection solutions in order to manage those threats. And so that's kind of the first layer, kind of the most essential layer. And then if we start to think about the safety and privacy of our students when they have those devices in hand and they're using them, we know that we need to have a really robust content filter that can provide whitelisting, blacklisting, can set policies, and so will allow schools and districts to really control the content that students do have access to protect them from anything that's inappropriate. And then as we move down into that green stripe there, and we start thinking about respect online, digital citizenship, we know that we need to educate our students about that, but in conjunction with that really good digital citizenship education, it's important that we're able to monitor student content to ensure that students are treating each other with respect, and that we can shield them from things like cyberbullying, threats of violence, even threats of self-harm, illicit content. So, that does pull in the content filtering a bit, but then also that student content monitoring is critical. And then, as Rich mentioned just a moment ago, we are, of course, most critically focused on engagement and students being focused during lessons, whether they're remote or hybrid or even face-to-face. And so we want to think about classroom management solutions so that teachers can sort of digitally walk around the classroom and see what's going on with students and making sure that they are engaged with the lesson. So the holistic approach that we present here means that we want to cover multiple bases. It requires multiple solutions. And so at Lenovo, we have partnered with some great great software companies in order to provide that. So Rich, back to you.
Okay, so we're going to go into a detailed look at DNS filter first, and how that's been a great relationship for us to begin building. And it's a fairly new relationship. We just announced that relationship in the spring. But we're going to turn it over to Josh and Glenn to have some conversation here about what they've seen, and especially some of the biggest challenges. Number one, you can't use, as I mentioned before, a firewall appliance. You can't control all of your home's networks within your school district or remote. And number two, these hotspots are adding this additional layer of complexity as well, and those are provided by the school systems in a lot of ways. So you're ultimately responsible for that in that student environment. So let me, I guess, go to Glenn first. Now that your customers are at home, or there may be a hybrid between home and school, what's the challenges that they're saying they're having from a filtering perspective?
Thanks, Rich. So as due to of course COVID accelerating the already increasing demand of transitioning to work from home environments, we have noticed, and as you had alluded to earlier, that in the traditional network topologies, we would of course apply filtering at the network layer, either through an appliance, through a firewall, or something like that, so that we can ensure network security within the corporate office. However, a lot of times those security principles do not apply once you take the equipment off the premise. When you're working in a coffee shop or off a hotspot or working out of your house. So what we ended up doing was we started looking for other solutions to where we could extend the network, the corporate network, to the edge case specifically. So we were relying less on the corporate infrastructure and more on software-based, web-managed solutions, so that we could ensure that we could maintain security of the edge device no matter where they were physically in the world.
Well, I know that this is a really important topic for the educators that are on the line. We did this poll as everyone was joining. 58% of the attendees said that students accessing inappropriate content on their school devices was a key issue. 37% was around bullying. There's concerns around kind of this web filtering around remote endpoints, and then there was 20% that are around kind of SIPA compliance. So it's a really broad range of issues that we're looking at, but there's got to be lots of solutions out there. What is the common type of solution to solve these issues?
Well, I don't think there's a silver bullet to fix all of it, but certainly taking a multi-layered approach. Especially there at the endpoint, we can't, like you said, manage individual networks. There are far too many of them. They're far too complex. And having everybody VPN back into the school or having everybody VPN back into a corporate environment, it just becomes an administrative nightmare. So by transitioning to a more category-based filtering, utilizing some artificial intelligence, and then doing a little whitelisting and blacklisting on top of all that, we can help ensure some security at the edge point directly, regardless of where the device may end up, lying within the infrastructure. Interesting.
I just had a quick thought. So I know we've got 55 people here attending. If you have specific questions as you think of it, feel free to join in and ask a question. We'll try to catch those as we're going. So we have the focused kind of speakers respond immediately to your questions, and if we don't get to them, we'll of course get to it at the end. But feel free to jump in with chat or question if you think of it. So let's say that I am a school district, and I had a filtering solution kind of in my school. What criteria would you recommend for schools that are trying to implement something for home use or for multi-purpose?
Well, I would definitely want something that would be agent-based, something that's not going to be reliant on, connectivity back to a central point, whether that's, again, like a corporate firewall or a centralized appliance like a Blue Code or something like that. Anything that you can manage from a central location, be it a web portal or a website, in which you can then apply those policies and then push those out to a distributed workforce or to a distributed education force would be imperative to me. And that's definitely something that I look for when I was looking for a filtering solution.
Thanks. I appreciate that insight. I mean, it's something that, you know, as a parent, I don't always think about a lot, you know, because I am used to my children being in a school environment. I don't necessarily think about the content that they have access to. And then at home, you know, I've got 3 kids learning from home: 5th grader, 7th grader, and a junior in high school, 11th grader. And, you know, I want, as a parent, I want those tools there, so that, because, you know, I'm working from home. You just heard my dog barking, you know, so it's like, I can't always be over their shoulder. I want them to be on task and to be safe, and appreciate, you know, partnerships to help us do that. So I guess kind of final thought question for you, Glenn, you know, how has this changed for you as we go from kind of fully on-site to fully remote and hybrid?
Well, one of the things that we noticed when we were utilizing a lot of the on-site solutions were they weren't really leveraging any type of artificial intelligence or really anything beyond just a basic whitelist, blacklist, as well as some content or category-based filtering solutions. But a lot of those, you know, category-based filtering solutions, we were seeing a lot of false positives with those types of solutions that were in place. And I can only presume it goes back to they were referencing some sort of a catalog that needed to be updated manually. You know, of course, as new websites spring up all the time, I mean, constantly, I felt like we were always playing catch up. And by looking at some more next generation solutions, especially those like DNS filter that offers the artificial intelligence, it's really taken a lot of an administrative load off of us.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. I mean, it's I'm sure, Josh, you're sitting there like typing in, you know, every URL that a school calls you up, but I'm sure that the AI tools can make that a lot easier. So, Glenn, hang on the line here. I'm gonna go over to Josh and kind of just have Josh tell us from the DNS filter perspective, how are you guys balancing this kind of need for content in remote learning with the ability to kind of moderate the traffic that students are getting?
Yeah, that's a good question, Rich. I mean, really, the AI is a big part of it, and I like to explain it a little bit because when you mention AI, people think, well, you know, it's kind of hand wavy. Like, what does that mean? In an educational perspective. So I guess first I'll say what it means is that we have a machine learning system that will actually check for over 30 different markers when it scans a website. And it'll scan it according to content, you know, whether or not something is, you know, terrorism or self-harm or, you know, gambling or anything like that would break a SIPA compliant category. But then it also checks for threats. So things that a human can't really see, you know, you might not have had your coffee in the afternoon. You didn't check that this fake login box was actually, you know, you would have noticed it, but it's actually fake. Those are the types of things that a computer can tell, you know, very instantly, that can be kind of fooled, you know, with the naked eye. So there's several different markers that we scan for. From an education perspective, what that means is that anytime a student on, you know, across our network, so all of the school districts we support, tries to visit a new website, we'll actually scan that ahead of them being able to visit it. And for you as an administrator, that means you don't have to update any block lists. You don't have to, you know, do any of that because we're automatically categorizing it according to the policy that you've set. So if you have a SIPA compliant categories set up, then you never have to update any lists. You never have to do any patches, you know, anything like that. It's all handled by our server. So I think that's the biggest administrative load that gets reduced. We also force safe search. So for Google and Bing and some of these other search engines, you're making sure that students are actually only able to search for appropriate content.
Well, how does how does a school district set this up? Is it easy to set up? What are the steps to make sure that, you know, the devices are safe and that they can feel secure in it? Can you take us through kind of that how hard this is to get set up?
Yeah, absolutely. It's pretty simple. So just as Glenn was talking about earlier, there's really two main deployment options. We actually have more than two, but the two main ones are, either setting it at the on-premise firewall, router, what have you, and just protecting an entire network, or what's going to be more common right now, the situation we find ourselves, which is where you will deploy a roaming client. So it's a very lightweight, I kind of describe it as like an arrow, basically. The actual software doesn't have to really do anything. It just points your computer to our servers to get filtered. So it's a very, very lightweight piece of software.
So
running an MDM.
They don't need to collect all the student devices, bring them back into the school, have them re-imaged, re-provisioned. They can do it remote.
Correct. Yeah. As long as you're set up to push software remotely, like and most people are, because you have to push updates to, your Office software or your antivirus or anything like that. You can just deploy it through that same mechanism.
Thanks. All right. So let's talk about sneaky kids. Are kids able to go around the firewall, go around the filter? What experiences have you had? And
yeah, kids are definitely notoriously, curious, I guess, and sneaky and able to figure things out. Sometimes they have all the time in the world to do it. But the big thing is whether or not they're granted administrator privileges, which in 99% of cases you're not going to operate that way for a host of other reasons, because they can disable antivirus, they can have privileges that they shouldn't have in the system. So that really will eliminate them being able to get around it, and that's a security practice we recommend. But we also have a few other tricks up our sleeve. You can actually hide the tray icon. You can hide it from add and remove programs. So we can be pretty invisible, even if they're not granted standard access.
That's really reassuring. I will tell you that we had, LAN school software was, part of our Lenovo offering, and we had students that were going onto the Android store who were just submitting like negative reviews. It's like, oh man, I can't access this website. I can't access this website. It's just like my First Amendment rights are being violated by this software application. And so, it is funny that students will definitely get desperate to try to get to the content that they want. In fact, we had 40% of the audience just voted in this poll. 67% of their students are trying to circumvent our monitoring. So definitely a huge issue. So in terms of practicality, though, does it slow down web traffic when you're having to filter all of the sites?
So it actually speeds it up. And I know that's going to sound from a marketing guy like, is that really true? But it does. And actually, if you go to dnsperf.com, you can actually see live performance statistics. So we're very public about the performance of our service. And
what was that site, Josh? We can type it into the chat.
dnsperf.com.
Okay, maybe when you get a break, just type it into the chat, push it out.
And so you can see actually that we're neck and neck with Cloudflare. There's actually a good amount of time that we're beating them, and they've been well known as being the fastest network. They don't really do any filter. Well, actually, they kind of introduced a thing recently, but we're basically neck and neck, usually beating them. And so that actually means that as an administrator and as a user, that you're experiencing a faster internet speed, because DNS stands behind all of the times you're loading websites. So for pretty much everybody, it's going to be faster.
Yeah, that's the pitch right there is, hey, this filtering actually makes your web experience better, students. Yeah. We're trying to get you faster internet content. So good. Well, let's just kind of have a little brief conversation between the three of us. So in terms of maintaining the web filter, Glenn, you said earlier, you were really glad that AI doesn't, that allows you to kind of take the manual entering kind of filter in there. How much time are you saving? Have you guys diagnosed that?
Anywhere between 5 and 10% on average. You know, we were getting in support tickets all day long, you know, on a regular basis from users saying, you know, hey, I can't access, you know, this website, or I can't access that website to, you know, pay utilities or to do research for something that they're working on. And we're having to go in and either manually whitelist it or add manual exceptions. Honestly, it was just, it was an administrative nightmare.
All right, so saving time, making the internet faster. Just real quick, last question for me is what type of reporting, what type of dashboards are customers going to get access to?
So they're going to be able to see like pretty good detail in terms of what requests are actually going out. So what websites their students are attempting to visit. If you have the roaming client installed, which obviously in a remote environment, you're going to do that. You're able to like match that particularly to each machine. If you're using Active Directory, which a lot of people are, you can see which users are accessing different things. You can slice and dice and kind of group people into different groups. You can actually synchronize with Active Directory. So most people have that set up already, and we'll just pull that information over and you know, be able to see exactly what sites people are trying to visit.
I know we have you a couple minutes here, Josh, to do a demo. Can you show us what some of that looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see if I can do my screen share here.
So while you're pulling that up, we did get a question in, and maybe you can answer this while we're going, or if not, we can go after. Is DNS Filter becoming a subsidiary of LandSchool, or are they simply partnering? The answer, Brian, is that we're simply partnering. So this is a partnership we announced in the spring, and we have a go-to-market partnership right now. So we're just collaborating to service the needs of our joint customers, really. Good question. Back to you, Josh.
So I'll show you, this is the overview screen as we go in. The first thing that I recommend people do is that they go in and set up a policy. Let me go ahead and minimize my little control panel here. And so I'll set up my school. And then you can go in and set up categories here, but actually as an education user, if you look over here, advanced, extra settings, and then this is a education feature right here. So this little switch will actually enable SIPA compliant categories already. So when I click agree here, if I go back to my categories, it actually has already selected everything according to the US SIPA standards. So like it's like, that's it right there. You can save this policy and be done. But I'll just kind of walk you through. Here's an example of what the content categories are. And then safe search is now enabled. We have the most safe search support of anybody that does web filtering. I think there's 6 or 7 engines right here, 5 or 6. And then if you go into threats here, so blocking botnet, crypto mining, malware, phishing, and deception. So again, these are the types of things that the AI is going to go and scan for. So if somebody creates a new phishing website yesterday and nobody knows about it yet, if you're the first person to go to that site, then we'll actually scan that and then we'll classify it for all of our customers across the world. That happens in less than 5 minutes usually. Now, the new domains category is also one that I would recommend. So this will actually automatically block newly registered domains for 30 days, which that's another anti-phishing measure. And then if you go into whitelist and blacklist here, you can actually, this has full wildcard support. So if I type in RU and add that, I'm now blocking all Russian RU domains on the whole internet. So if I typed in like com, for example, I'd be blocking all .com domains, which would not be fun, but I can do it. Then I'm going to go ahead and go into deployments here, and I will add, say, my high school. And then here's where you would enter your external IP addresses for that school. So you'd be able to enter that, and then you would point your router or firewall to these addresses here, and you'd be able to set it up.
Hey, Josh, I think we're gonna start to transition to the second half. Any last thoughts on this that you want the attendees to take away?
Yeah, I would say really the last thing, yeah, just it's very simple to set up, very simple to operate and be able to see the reporting. So yeah, it's pretty slick.
Awesome. Glenn, Josh, thanks so much for the time talking about DNS filter and securing our students. I'm going to transition to Delia to talk about the other side of kind of filtering, and that is content and BARC.
Thanks, Rich. Yeah, Josh, I will just say in closing with DNS filter, I really like the dashboard because of how intuitive it is, very easy to read, very colorful. And I just came out of a district about a year ago and I thought, oh, this is an easy filter to use. So the other thing that occurs to me is how much filtering and online student safety has changed in the last 20 years. And it's been, I started teaching middle school and high school over 20 years ago now, believe it or not. And so I got pretty familiar in the early 2000s with the importance of filtering and protecting students from all that harmful content. And the reality is now, of course, I think that there's been even more need for monitoring of mental health and that cyberbullying, the cyberbullying issues and self-harm. So Jim, you deal with this on a regular basis in your district, protecting of students. Can you talk to us a little bit about kind of what your key concerns are and kind of what you see and why your district started to use BARC?
Thank you. Yeah, we kind of wanted a way to, we're a G Suite district, and we give our accounts to everybody from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade, and we wanted to be able to monitor it without it being real heavy. Because just like with web filtering, it can be a time-consuming whole project to try to keep tabs on everything. And so we've been using BARC ever since it was first announced a few years back, and well, the best part is it's free. So that was a real big initiative for us. They are very good at communication and sending out new products, and it was easy to set up. Just like Josh was showing his product. You go in there and you set up. We're a Chromebook district, but we do have some Windows machines. You just set up a extension in your browsers and your Chrome devices. You blast it out, and it was ready to go instantly. Just like you're setting up a cloud-based filter. This is a cloud-based monitoring service where it'll pull in all their Gmail. It'll pull in from their Google Drive too, because a lot of people don't think about it, but kids use Google Drive to communicate with each other as like a black under the black site, if you will, where nobody thinks about, oh, they're just going to send an email. Well, they're going to communicate and they can share documents, and sometimes kids can cheat that way too. And so we've been able to find some things that the kids were doing. They were chatting. Of course, we have a lot of those things, like the actual chat is locked down in our district. But because it usually goes unmonitored, and so BARC was able to allow us to kind of keep tabs on that for us. Every building can actually have their own monitor person. So I have not only myself as the district level, I've got the principals of each building, I've got the school counselors at the high school and junior high school, and then we have a security officer, the school safety officer from our sheriff's department. He can actually get those notifications as well. So, it's the idea you can build a community of support people where, I might see it before they do, they might see it. And then the nice thing is just a one click, and I can send a, hey, you better check this out kind of message to whoever's set up in those different buildings. So.
Great. Yeah, so lots of people can get those alerts and monitor. Can you talk to us a little bit about the trends that you see in terms of the alerts from BARC and what kinds of what are the things that students are being protected from?
It's a wide variety of things. Actually, I'm looking at my BARC dashboard here. There's monitor. So like anything that references violence, self-harm, cyberbullying, depression, drug and alcohol kind of things. And it actually keeps track of if they do searches like Google searches, that's a big one. Just like your web filter, it will be able to track keywords. BARC does a similar thing, so they kind of work hand in hand with your web filter and this BARC technology. And so it'll go in and keep tabs of what there's like YouTube searching as well. You know, what we can see, and then what I like is has a timestamp.
Okay.
So if I know, you know, our district is predominantly in school. So if it's 11 o'clock in the morning and they're searching for something on YouTube that probably isn't real education friendly, it sends me a notification, and I can say, hey, maybe little Johnny should be doing something a little more school appropriate. And so it gives the teachers some extra support to show the principal that, hey, the kids are kind of, you know, not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and it gives you that alert that something's going on.
In real time, right? So what you just said raises a question for me that I think some of our audience might have as well, which is, and Renee, maybe you can weigh in here. So can you enlighten us a little bit about where web filtering leaves off and student content monitoring picks up? And Jim referenced how they kind of work together.
Yeah, for sure. And they work together. I would think of it as web filtering focuses on the where are students going and what are they interacting with. Content monitoring is going to focus on the how are students communicating with each other in even improved digital spaces. How are they expressing distress, and are they using the school accounts as intended, as Jim just mentioned. Let's say you have a student who's attempting to access a site that has sexually explicit material. Well, the web filter is going to catch that, block it, and prevent that student from gaining access. But let's say you have a group of students in a shared doc, going back to how Jim was saying, we know our kids are communicating with each other. Well, let's say one of the students in that shared doc adds a sexually explicit, since they're in a that's not something a web filter would, it wouldn't apply there. So with content monitoring, we're going to detect that image and we'll be able to alert you to it.
Oh, that's really helpful. Thanks for clarifying that. And audience, if you would weigh in this poll about your concerns regarding bullying and emotional issues in a distance learning environment, we'll share the poll results in just a little bit. So another question that Jim's insights raised for me is how BARC is able to distinguish between different uses of language. Like, for example, how kids might use slang or, you know, favorite phrases or memes to communicate, and they can mean one thing in one context and one in another. So Jim or Renee, how does that kind of play out when it comes to monitoring content and not getting a slew of alerts for things that aren't actually concerning, but might seem concerning because of, you know, it uses the word kill, but it's not actually about killing anybody?
For sure. And well, I'm just so happy you asked this question. I'll go ahead and jump in first, Jim, if you don't mind. I love this question because this is where the sophistication and the power of our machine learning algorithm shines. So remember, we've been learning the way that children communicate with each other for 5+ years. So we can identify trends and changes in communication. Most of us on this call have probably seen student communication that is only in slang and emojis and acronyms, and it's those areas, and memes, as Delia mentioned. So it's those areas where this machine learning contextual analysis is going to be really impactful. So with our tech, we're learning new slang in real time. And we even know which emojis or which group of emojis are benign and which ones are red flags. So, you know, schools don't have to attempt the impossible, which is keeping up with students' rapidly changing patterns of communication, because BARC really does do that work for you. I think a good current example is, you know, when students are referencing Deb or Dan, it seems benign, but we know that that's how our kids are talking about depression, or one that many might be familiar with when they're talking about exchanging pasta recipes, or you know, finishing their shampoo and conditioner at these are all codes for suicidal ideation. So those are just a few examples and a few ways that BARC kind of just helps you stay in the know and also identifies issues that would have otherwise gone under the radar.
Great, thank you. That's helpful. Jim, did you want to weigh in at all on the contextual language piece?
Yeah, what it does is it pulls in, you know, just like a web filter has keywords, so it pulls in a lot of keywords. And what I've noticed over the years of using it is just like she mentioned, the AI is getting smarter. Of, you know, when I first started, you know, there's a couple other things out there that do this, but as the AI gets smarter, it knows there's less and less of the false positives, you know, where like there'll be a searching for, you know, kill, and it'll have a YouTube something, and it might be a name of a song or something. But that, I mean, it's still important that you see those web searches, because just because it might be a music video, we all know that YouTube is not the safest spaces we like it to be, you know, where we can block it. You know, and just like I said, I have about 1,700, 1,800 students in my little district. Over the years that we've been using it, my dashboard says it scanned 7.7 million different pieces of activities in my little network here. So
Wow.
you can just imagine somebody at a bigger school than me, what they'd be getting, you know, and
Sure.
you know, that's huge.
Well, so you raised an important point here, which is that you wouldn't be able to do that kind of work with your small team, especially given the volume of what's been scanned. So can you talk to us a little bit about how BARC has impacted your team and how much of a time saver it's been across the district?
Yeah, for me, like I said, we kind of divvy it out, but of course I know that the principals and the other folks I mentioned are busy too. So usually I have it on my kind of like a checklist in the morning, maybe in the afternoon or the evening when I'm at home. I can check this from home because this filter works whether the kids are at school or at home. So we do have some kids that are working from home as in a home-based instruction for an online school. It'll still filter. It's filtering the device and the student's Gmail. So even if they log into home or our device at home, it's still working on its own, just like a web filter would. And so that's helped us that we don't have to worry about where they're at. If they're using our stuff, that it's getting scanned. Now, of course, the other problem is we can't control, just like you mentioned with the other networks outside of our network, we can't control if they're using a personal Gmail. But a lot of times they might use their personal Gmail with somebody else's school email. Which includes the teachers. So I can even see the teachers. I have the ability to see what the staff is seeing, you know, and so if I see something that maybe a staff person might even need some help with something, you know, we've actually had where we've seen children that have gone through a rough time, you know, and so we've been able to, hey, let's pick up the phone call because we know each other personally, and we'll send messages to the counselors and even the sheriff's office. We have that relationship at the school that or the community, so we kind of actually help some kids that were struggling through some tough times. And these even before the COVID, you know, this is a year or two ago, we've had some issues like many other communities that the kids just need somebody watching out for them, whether they know it or not. Big Brother's still watching in a good way too.
Yeah, absolutely. And so based on the poll results, this last question, 66% of the folks who are attending today said that they either need to understand the student safety piece better, or they had no idea that you could monitor it like this. And as you pointed out, especially with the pandemic, there's a real increase in stress and isolation. So it's a really good time, I think, to have something like BARC at play in a district. I do, given people's interest in the student content monitoring, I want to give Renee an opportunity to show what the dashboard looks like. And Jim, you've actually given us some awesome examples and statistics from your district dashboard. So Renee, can you screen share and show us what this looks like?
By the way, while Renee's pulling that up, I just kind of want to hang out in the BARC lounge, like in the lunchroom there, where like, hey, did you hear the new word the kids are using this week? Like, have you ever heard the word yeet? What does yeet mean anyway? It's like,
how do you spell that?
Exactly.
As the expert, I'll jump in here. It's Y-E-E-T, Delia.
And what does it mean? I have no idea.
A variety of things, but typically, I guess the official definition would be used to show excitement.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I learned something. I've learned many things today, but that's one of them.
Trust me, and that is, you know, that is something that keeps us on our toes, and it is a lot of fun had in the Slack channel day by day, learning the new slang. So, well, what I have up on the board here is the dashboard, and I know we want to make sure we leave enough time for everyone's questions. So I really just will show you how you will turn on Bark for Schools, and I'd love to show you an alert as well. So main dashboard, you'll see your very first report. This is just a snapshot of your activity over all of your monitored groups or all of your monitored students. You'll get the alerts that have come in per day, and then this is where you'll see the types of alerts. Just you know, at a glance, I can tell that I've had more alerts for self-harm or suicidal content than all of the others. So right off the bat, this is a place that shows me that, you know, this is a place we need to redirect our efforts. And you can see here cyberbullying, depression, drug and alcohol related content. These are all things that we're actively monitoring student communication for. I'm going to go to, well, we'll go to settings then. While we're here, this is how you turn on Bark for School. So when you download Bark from either your G Suite admin console or from your 365 admin account, you are going to give us permission to monitor all of the groups, but we're not monitoring anything at all until you come to your dashboard and you simply turn on the groups or OUs you would like for us to monitor. It really is that simple. We set this up in a way where you can download Bark in the morning and start receiving alerts from your student accounts that afternoon. So again, in the interest of time, I want to make sure I show you just the issues page. Now, all of your issues appear, again, here in the dashboard. Now, I mentioned a few of the categories we're monitoring for, but I think it's important to mention also we're not just alerting to these very severe instances of severe cyberbullying or suicidal ideation. We're also alerting to all of these different categories and subcategories that we know negatively impact student outcomes. You'll see here that dangerous organizations is here, hate speech is on here, even phishing. So there are a lot of different things that we are monitoring student communication for and able to alert you so you can intervene quickly. All of the alerts appear here. You'll notice some of them have this bright red severe designation, which I think there are a few questions that'll allow me to come back to that later. Let's just take a look at an alert. For actual student communication. So I'm sorry if you have to clutch your pearls a few times, but this is the first alert that we'll take a look at. And this is an example of just something that would have been flagged by Bark. You have the option here to share it with another reviewer on your team, which I know Jim spoke about earlier. This is a really great tool. If you're using our parent portal, which is a free feature that lets parents get alerts, then you'll also have the option to share this with their parents. And then within the alert itself, we have this super useful tool, our issue feedback button, which to Jim's point, speaks to one of the many things we have in place results that you're getting from Bark. So what's important to my district is probably not important to Josh's district. So this is a way by simply selecting yes or no, we've put in place to help schools tailor what they're getting from Bark. I would love to show you some settings and other things. So give me a nod or a thumbs up if I can move on, or if we can save this for a later date.
Well, I wish we are starting to run out of time. I wish we could do a full demo, but I hope that I think that what you've shown us shows the power of what Bark provides, and the fact that it's free and that the parent portal is free as well is really compelling. So I hope that for people who have joined who are interested, they will check out the Bark website. And I know we're going to put those links in the chat, and they can start to take a look and then potentially get a demo if they are interested. Yeah. I do thank you so much, Renee, for sharing that with us, and Jim for sharing your experience with the platform, having used it for several years in your district. I do see that we're starting to get a few questions. And Rich, before we start to address those, I'm hoping you can speak a bit to the reasons why Lenovo is partnering with these companies and are so important to our distance learning solution.
Yeah, thanks, Delia. So, I think I addressed this kind of at the beginning, but the idea is as a technology provider, our role is to create this great technology and to put out in the hands of our students and teachers to be effective in their education experience, improve their learning outcomes, and give them the resources to not only do well at school, but to improve in their lives and going forward. But in order to do that, like, we have to make sure that students are safe, that teachers can manage their classroom environments, and that we can focus on the learning outcomes. So from that standpoint, it's really about balancing productivity and protection. It's about giving teachers the confidence to use technology without being worried about students accessing inappropriate content, and keeping them focused on the lesson. So for me, these both have very important applications, both DNS filter and Bark, in the lives of our students and teachers. I mean, take an example of a student that is searching for articles on Lance Armstrong, and they come across in the Lance Armstrong article about testicular cancer, right? That site, may get flagged for something that's inappropriate. Without these kind of smart tools, you're going to have teachers, you're going to have administrators that are having to deal with all of these individual issues. And with Bark there, it could notice the context, it could notice kind of what is happening in the context of that article. With the DNS filter side, that could be a white label site. It's a legitimate research site. It's not going to be something that you have to worry about. So it actually makes life so much easier for educators. And that's what's valuable for us at Lenovo is, look, find the best in class safety solutions. Partner with those tools to provide, these AI-driven solutions. I don't know if we mentioned this, but DNS filter is a 30-day free trial. Bark is free, and you should be using that regardless. We didn't really talk about that today, but they do have a upgraded option. Will they provide some of the monitoring for you at the schools? So look, it's about finding these best-in-class partners and making them available for our customers. So I'm proud of kind of these partnerships we brought together, but let's see if we have any additional questions that haven't been answered, and we can kind of use the panel to help answer some of those questions as well.
Absolutely, great. Yeah, and I will add just to what you said, that I think that given that how complicated the learning landscape is for educators right now, especially given the need to move from face-to-face to remote, back to face-to-face potentially, there's so much going on with just getting lessons designed for the various platforms and learning situations. And so I feel like tools like DNS filter and Bark do definitely, they're a time saver, and they do such critical work when we are in this complicated landscape. So I'm excited by how we are supporting education and educators with important tools like these. Let's see, let's pull out one of the questions that we've got here in the questions section. I've got one for Josh about DNS filter. This participant, Joel, wants to know if you enforce safe search for search engines or YouTube restrictions.
It's for both, actually. So if you go in, you'll be able to see Google Safe Search, and then for YouTube, you can actually adjust whether there's a couple of different restriction levels that you can do.
Okay, good to know. And so while we're talking about DNS filter, let me throw this one at you as well. Can you integrate with Active Directory? And maybe you can explain what Active Directory is for those of us who might not know.
We can, yeah. So yeah, Active Directory is a way of managing all of your users and devices and managing policy. So that's a Microsoft-centered way of doing that. And so for a lot of education providers, if you've set this up, you have like a teachers group, you have a students group, you have devices attached to them and things like that. So rather than try to go into the DNS filter dashboard and try to recreate that, you can actually just sync it over and then everything you're used to will come over.
Awesome.
Hey, Josh, question from the audience here. What's the status of the DNS filter Chrome extension?
That is, yeah, it's exciting. That's in phase 3 right now. It's being used with Lenovo with some customers right now, but it's getting ready for a public release soon. So
great. So yeah, thanks for that. Delia, are there any other questions that bubbled up?
Yes, I do have one other BARC related question, and I think Jim addressed it somewhat, but you might be able to give us some more details, Renee. How quickly are issues flagged, and what happens next when you get an alert?
Sure. Well, you know, we're monitoring these questions, or these accounts, I should say, 24/7, and so when there's a potential issue detected, the algorithm determines its severity, and then that alert appears in the dashboard that I showed you earlier. Now, for severe alerts, reviewers also get a notification via email. Now, we also mentioned Parent Portal earlier, so when we start talking about what happens next, if administration receives the alert, then they follow the plan set in place by their safety team. But with Parent Portal, that's a way for parents to receive that alert, which is especially important if it's a time when administration simply isn't available, like after hours, or just because the child is learning from home and the parent's in the best position to intervene. So alert comes in, and then administration gets it, or the parent gets it.
Great. Okay, thank you. That was really helpful. Rich,
Hey,
I think we better move to the raffle.
I know. I want to move to the raffle so badly, but I have one more question that I want to have answered.
Okay.
Just real quick. So Renee and Jim, I will tell you that I talked to a large customer about BARC, and they said that they were worried that would increase their liability by having the BARC reports. Do you have a quick response to that?
I definitely want to hear Jim's take on this, so I'll be short. But I get that answer, or I get that from schools often, Rich, when they're kind of on especially large districts that are kind of not sure about if they want this level of intelligent monitoring. I just think it's so much better to know and to be able to help our students. We definitely have a mental health crisis happening in our K-12 schools. And so if more information is going to help us help our children and help them learn better, then I think that outweighs even a small increase in perceived liability, if that answers that.
Yeah, it does. Any quick insights from you, Jim?
Yeah, one thing I always tell people when we talk about this kind of stuff is, what did we do in the 80s and the 70s and the 60s? How did we address these issues before? You know, take the technology out of it. Were you still looking for that? Did you still want to know about it? What was your liability before the computer got involved? You know, I mean, you know, the pen can be really powerful, what it can do, you know, so I would not want to be the one that's ignoring the issue and not trying to do anything you can. You know, they always teach in education when you get your degree in teaching, what would a proper and prudent person do? That's what they drilled into us in education, is you got to do the best you can. You know, just like web filters, there's going to be stuff that gets through the filters. There is no perfect filter. There never will be. You know, we'd like to see that, but you at least got to try to do the best you can and say, you know, hey, we really are trying. We're aware of the problem and we're trying to address it. You know, that's the best you can do. I mean, to ignore it and not try to do anything, I think would be even more liable for me.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks a lot, Renee. And so that's just saw the slide pop up. It's time for the raffle. So if we can get a virtual drum roll. The winner is Brian Neufeld. Brian Neufeld, congratulations on the Amazon gift card. Just a reminder that we will have one of these each of the scheduled sessions. So come back each week. Delia is going to just take you through kind of our next schedule for the next 5 weeks.
Yes, and don't forget, if you attend 3 of our webinars, 3 of the 6 webinars in the series, you are eligible for the $100 Amazon gift card. Jennifer, our assistant here, is going to put the registration links in the chat box, and we'll also follow up with an email. You can see coming up next is managing your classes remotely in real time, as well as immersive learning, increasing engagement with immersive learning. And we also want to make sure that you know how to take some next steps if you want to learn more about BARC and DNS filter. So on the next slide, you'll see the names and email addresses for contacts. We'll put those in the chat and put those in our follow-up email as well. The email you get from us will have a recording of this webinar, as well as a playbook on protecting students online with best practices. So we're excited to share that with you, and we hope we'll see you next Tuesday afternoon, where we'll talk about increasing engagement with immersive learning. Thanks again to our awesome panel.
And Josh and Renee and Jim. Thank you so much. And
Thank
guys,
you.
we'll see you soon. Bye.